Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Breathing Room. I'm your host, Rob Lavati, and I'm technically flying solo today, but I'm joined by my co-hosts in the studio, John Rodriguez and Nathan Robinson. Nate had you on episode 1, and you talked a little bit about van life, and you shared a song with us. And it was cool to get to talk to you a little bit, and looking forward to having you back on today, maybe in the driver's seat a little bit, and asking some of the questions. So, and John is a good friend of mine. I've known John since the 3rd or 4th grade. We've been good friends for a number of years. And John actually made the music for the intro of this show, which I'm really grateful for. So thanks for putting that together. Maybe we could talk about that at some point today.
Yeah, man.
And yeah, just want to kind of set the groundwork and talk a little bit about foundationally what this show is about, how I got started, and what I would like to include on this show going forward. So as I mentioned on episode 1, if you had a chance to listen to that, that was Nate Robinson and Kat Dolan. And Kat shared a poem on there called Nobody But Myself, I believe was the title of the poem, and it was really a moving poem. I've gotten a lot of feedback on it so far. So in episode 1, I mentioned that about a month before moving to Asheville, my father committed suicide. So that was in September of 2017. It's something that has definitely changed my life. I mean, there's no doubt when I look back that was kind of an event for me that changed the way that I look at my own life and changed what I feel like my role is going forward. And it's something that I think I've learned a lot about and learned a lot from by being open and vocal and sharing about it. So what I really want this show to be, John, I think you might have been there for some of this, but right after my dad died, we had a lot of people over at the house. And there was a group of us who congregated down in the basement, and we sat in a big circle. There were maybe 9 or 10 of us, and we talked very openly and directly about my dad's suicide.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
And it was some people who were family, some friends, some people that I had just met or wasn't very close to. And Maggie and I just talked about what we were experiencing. And what I noticed was really interesting is that people who were sitting there, like I said, whether family, friend, or almost perfect stranger, felt comfortable to open and share up what they were going through themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people before long were talking about how they lost someone to suicide, or how they felt suicidal themselves, or how they were addicted to heroin. I mean, people really opened up in that conversation, and I got to learn about the people that were in that room in a really unique way, I think, by starting with some of the hard stuff that I had that I can bring to the table that is part of me. I realized that we all have some of that going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, I remember that night. It was pretty surprising. Like, I remember sitting in the room and thinking, I've known these people for quite a bit of time. And, once they opened up and shared their own experiences, I was surprised. I was like, wow, I didn't know that, we all shared some sort of common ground, like, with that area.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's pretty eye-opening to think, it sucks. It takes like a traumatic event like that to get people to open up. You think it should be just easier. I mean, I think it's overall better for people, if they just speak freely and openly about their emotions. But yeah, it took a pretty big moment like that for everybody to come together and really share their own experiences like that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was glad everyone did. I mean, I think I learned, like you said, a lot about each of the people who decided to share there. And I felt grateful that people got to hear my experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're going through something like a suicide, if it's your first time dealing with that, it's easy to feel like you're the only person who feels like you do at that exact moment. So when you can connect with other people and realize that other people have been in a similar position, and you can see things that they did that were effective to help them deal with it, I think that's how you can really learn and grow from that type of experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I hope to do with this show is create that space where maybe through some of my experiences and things that I've gone through in the past couple of years, whether related to my dad or to my mental health opportunities, which is something that I definitely want to get into on this episode today. That's a part of me that I've had to learn to cope with and live with and own, I think most importantly. It's something you have to take seriously, something you have to treat like going to the gym.
Yeah.
You have to take care of your mind and do some of the things that are going to be effective to help you feel better, right? So that's that's why we do maybe the little 10 seconds of silence thing at the beginning of each episode. Something that has been really effective for me has been meditation. I try to do it every day. I miss a couple days here and there. But I found that when I take the time to do that for 5 or 10 minutes every day and create that intentional space where I'm processing something that I'm going through or something that I'm feeling in my body, it's helped me be more present in my regular day-to-day activities.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can take that mindset of just focusing on one thing, whether it's my breath or a thought that I'm having or a feeling in my body. I can take that and apply it to, okay, I'm only focusing on working on this podcast right now, even though my anxiety is at like a 7 and I didn't sleep well last night. You know, like there's all the things that are still always there, but it's made me feel more capable of taking them on, you know?
What do you think is the most efficient way to meditate? Like, say for someone just starting out or who doesn't meditate like often.
Yeah. There are a lot of great resources that are available out there. The app that got me to meditate was called Headspace.
Yeah, I've used that. Yeah, it's pretty good.
I got the paid version because I just really grew to like it, but it's guided meditation. There's a nice British man who will take you through as long as you'd like to go.
Oh my God, his voice is so soothing.
So soothing. I could listen to it all day.
Yeah.
It's really great.
It's like Morgan Freeman, like just floating on a river of honey.
Do you always have a guided meditation, or do you?
No, recently I've been just meditating in silence, in darkness if I can.
In darkness?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just close myself in a room, sit on a yoga mat, and just unplug and try to create the space. But for someone who's just getting started out, I think going guided is a nice way to do it because they will teach you a bunch of various techniques, right? So they will help take you to that meditative state or place maybe quicker than you could find on your own. But it's definitely like a buffet. You're not going to like everything they give you, and you have to find the techniques that are helpful for you.
I don't know, man. I like a lot of things that are on buffets. Just saying.
I don't know, man. The crab legs, they've been there for a while.
Maybe not as fresh as you'd think.
No,
Yeah.
especially on a Sunday.
Do you ever find that if you're just meditating without a non-guided meditation, you're just doing it on your own in the dark, that it could almost be hurtful? Because if you're in a bad headspace and a bad mentality and you're just sitting there and you can't get your mind off of it, you just kind of default to that place, you know, because you're in your depressive or anxious state or whatever it is, that doing that meditation during that time could be hurtful because you're just sitting there in it.
The only thing I don't agree with is maybe the word hurtful. I think that meditation could be a painful experience. I think it could be very uncomfortable. But this might be unpopular. I think it's important to go through that. I found that when I've stopped to meditate at times that I've been really anxious or feeling really depressed, isolated, the times that it's been the hardest and most uncomfortable to do have been the times that I've felt the best benefit from it. So it was definitely hard to do, and I didn't want to be doing it. There were a million things I'd rather be doing in those moments.
But it's a good pain.
But especially with anxiety, a lot of times the only way for me to get through that is to sit there and deal with it and label it and say, like, okay, I'm not dying or having a heart attack. I'm having anxiety right now.
Yep. It makes you more conscious.
Yeah.
Conscious of your feelings at the time and your emotions.
Yep.
Just how to kind of process that. Or maybe you don't need to exactly process it. You just need to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Just think like, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now, and I need to kind of just be open to it, be present with it.
Yeah. And realize that it doesn't have to guide you. It can be a part of you, not the guiding part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why getting focused on your breath is such a helpful technique, because it's it's a more physical, grounded component of yourself that you can focus on and essentially relate yourself to, rather than your brain, which is doing what it wants to be doing by default, which is think, right? If we're not doing something, if we're not applying the use of our brain, it wants to think. That's the way your lungs want to breathe and your heart wants to beat. So what we have to learn to do is understand the things that our brain thinks when we don't give it something to think about. Where does your brain go when you have a moment of silence? I think it's important to kind of take note of that and realize what your default pathways are.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because something I've heard that's like been thrown around just in like with people studying how the mind works is that when people are anxious or depressed, there's a part of their brain that they've titled it the default mode network.
Yep.
And it's just like you said, the default way that your brain goes to just thinking. Like it's like breathing, but it's almost like getting your way of thinking trapped in like a certain pattern, and meditation's supposed to help you break out of that.
Right. I've heard the comparison of a cornfield with really tall corn in it, and you walk the same path day after day. After a month or two, there's going to be a pathway paved in the cornfield, right? So that's going to be the easiest way for you to take the default path. It's going to take some work to create a new pathway to get to the other side. The brain kind of works in a similar way when you retrain or you have rewards for ways that you think. It's just being reinforced. But anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. I
could go down a couple rabbit holes.
There are multiple rabbit holes we can go down there.
Yeah.
I think all tying into the idea that this is something that we're all going through in some way. That's something that I firmly believe and stand by, is that everybody, whether they see it or not, is going through their own mental opportunity, or has at some point in their life. So I'd like to give this space for people to share what that looks like for them. And what the feedback I've gotten so far is that people can relate. People heard Kat's poem and they thought, wow, I never would have talked about my depression in that way. And that's what I think is unique about creating this space and talking about some things that are maybe taboo or have stigma associated with them typically.
Yeah.
But I think just creating that open dialogue and making them not so scary is a really powerful thing and a way to help people heal, honestly. So maybe just a little bit more about myself. I think I gave a little introduction in episode 1. My name is Rob Lavati again. And I'm 28 years old and based out of Asheville, North Carolina. I clear my throat sometimes, and during my day job, I'm a consultant in the tech field. And some of my hobbies include going to therapy, which is something I want to talk about today. I do that quite a bit, and I found myself a pretty effective regimen for myself. I like to be around music and create music, and I think a lot of the people that I would like to invite to be on the show have so far at least been musically minded or had music be some part of their story or their journey, right? And I lost my train of thought. So
Going back to what you said about going to therapy,
Yeah.
what what has been like useful for you? That because I've been to therapy before, but I haven't had like a regiment where I go, every week. I've maybe seen a therapist and then, had a couple sessions and it hasn't really panned out.
Right.
What have you found that's useful to like get you to keep going?
Yeah. I think for me, it took finding the right person first and foremost. It has to be somebody you get along with. I mean, this is a person that, if you're talking about a psychologist, somebody you're going to sit down with as a therapist and talk to them weekly or something like that. This is a person that you would almost want to be friends with, and somebody that seems to have an understanding of you and helps lead you to the right answer and the solution without giving you the answer.
Yeah.
That's important. If you sit down with somebody and they tell you, why don't you try this? That's not a very intuitive way of trying to get to the root of what the best solution is going to actually be for us. So finding the right person was the first, then pushing through the uncomfortable phase.
Mm-hmm.
This is a person at first you don't know at all, and you're putting some of your most personal stuff out there. So there's definitely an element of becoming
Trust.
comfortable and trust. Yeah, that's a big part. And I definitely feel like I have that with my current therapist, who I see once a week. I call her my paid friend. That's a term I like using. And it's nice because if I'm in a place where I really just need to vent and talk about some things that are going on, she'll create that space. Or if she wants to, or if I want to work through some pretty deep traumatic things from my past, she'll work through those as well. Mm-hmm. So you have to find someone who's willing to work with you and understands your story a little bit. Because everyone has a story in their own way, right? And everyone has some trauma that they carry. I think describing myself, I have a lot of what some people call little t, which is just
What's little t?
Little traumas or micro traumas that have happened throughout your life that are really no one specific major trauma, but still have resulted in trauma-like symptoms.
Like when you get pantsed and they accidentally get your underwear down and you're just like full.
So it's like you don't have one with the underwear, but you have like 16 where your underwear stay on.
Okay.
You have a story for that, John?
No.
No?
I just
know
thought I was like, that happened to me. That'd be pretty traumatic. Have everyone in school like see my dong.
Yeah, that wouldn't be
at
fun.
that age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be
You're, like,
more
the
worried
most insecure.
about my butt, personally. Yeah, I don't want
Really?
I don't want everyone to see my butt.
You've shown
Shy-
so
yeah,
many
shy
people
butt.
your butt. I don't.
But it's
buy
when
that.
I choose. If I don't have the power in the situation, it's just kind of off to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So you're saying those little T's, they add up over time.
Right.
They
And
build
then-
complexes, pretty much.
Yeah.
And they build default ways that we respond to things. Some of them are really easy to pick out and noticeable, and other ones we don't even recognize are going on. Like for me, when I see flashing lights or hear a police siren or see an ambulance, it brings up memories of the night we found my dad. Because when I got there, that's what was there. And that's what really stands out in my mind. So that one's really obvious, right? I've been able to pinpoint that and relate that and work through it pretty easily. But then I think there are more complicated and complex traumas that come from even before we were speaking or making memories, really. Like if you were left to cry for too long,
Yep.
that could help create some kind of really complex attachment that you have later on in life that you're not consciously processing.
You don't even realize it.
Right.
Yeah. I've thought about that because I'll share a little bit of a personal story here.
Ooh, joy.
No, yay. As far as I can remember, like my mom and my dad have never been together. But, you know, just from what I hear, that when they were together, they were young, it was very toxic. Like,
Right.
you know, they would fight all the time. It was pretty abusive. And, you know, I can't imagine, like, you know, I was a baby and I have no memories of it, but being around that and in that environment, you know, I'd imagine that's like, you're still taking in information, like when you're
Absolutely.
an infant, you know,
Absolutely.
you still see things and experience things. And, you know, I wonder sometimes, like, has that played a big part in who I am as a person? Like, do I have to work through that now? You know? So, yeah, it's interesting to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And that's definitely a thought that I've had myself. I had a really good conversation with my mom last week, where we talked about some of the memories that I have growing up of where my mom and dad would be arguing, which is something normal that happens in a relationship, right? And when you have kids, the kids might be around for it.
Yeah.
That's just, I think, a natural consequence of that. But it's funny how vivid those memories are for me, because they were traumatic and because I cared about both of my parents and they were fighting. It really stands out in my memory, and I can remember what I was doing, what I was wearing, where I was, how I felt. And when that feeling or a similar feeling comes up for me now, I can almost relate it to that, which I think is a little T.
Yeah.
Which is something good to acknowledge and just like recognize that it's there.
Yeah.
And talk about. It was really good to talk to my mom about that. I think putting it out there in the open and letting her know that I have no resentment for it. I don't think it was a bad thing or they did a bad job.
Yeah.
I recognize that it's probably hard to be married and harder to be married with kids. So I can certainly empathize with that.
Yeah,
but
my family yells at each other all the time, but I just
people yell.
Yeah, I just accept it as that's how they communicate with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Nate has never yelled in his life.
Never yelled.
Not one time.
I think I figured out not too long ago a little T of mine. When I was riding the bus last week. I think I told you this story. This guy got on the bus and spilled some beer, and the bus driver was like, all right, you got to get off the bus. You got to go. And he was just being belligerent and just like sitting there and not getting off the bus. And so me and this other guy stepped in, and I was like, I had it in my head I was going to be really nice to this guy, and I introduced myself and I asked him what his name was. And I was like, hey man, we can catch the next bus, you know, let's get off the bus. And he just wasn't having it. So me and this other guy, we like dragged him off the bus, physically removed him, and then while I was still like in my head, I was like, all right, this guy's off the bus. Let's get his stuff off the bus so we can have it. And he hit me in the face.
Oh,
and when he hit me, I just like barely reacted to it. I was just like, okay, whatever, relax, buddy, you know. And then he hit me again, and that's when it took him 2 times to hit me in the face before I like reacted, and I was like, all right, I like threw him on the ground after that, you know.
Right.
But I think it came from like I don't think my dad ever taught me to fight back. Like my dad hit me, and that's like I never learned to hit back, and I didn't realize that until then. That's why I don't care to get, like, it doesn't bother me to get hit. And in the military I was hit so much, and it just like I just kind of egged it on, and I never realized like why I like egged it on, because like a part of me like wanted that, or it's just something like familiar to me.
Yeah, you were conditioned.
Yeah, I was conditioned to fucking get hit.
Right.
And not saying anything bad about my dad. I love my dad, and he did a great job of raising us all. But yeah, that was just a thing that it took me friggin' 30 years to realize that. So.
And it's powerful that you were able to find the connection between those things. and realize maybe some of those feelings were coming up for you again.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's nothing speaking ill of your father.
It's just a
acknowledging
part of life.
something that happened.
Right.
That was a part of your experience, you know?
Yeah.
And I think the unfortunate thing about trauma is when it comes up for people is it's up to us. It's up to the person having the experience to do the work that's going to get through it. Other people can apologize, they can offer support, but when it comes to being okay and feeling okay with those feelings, that work is on you. And that's hard. And that's where a lot of the therapy has been helpful for me. So in addition to going to my weekly therapy, I also do a weekly group, which is called DBT, or Dialectical Behavioral Therapy, which is something that I think they should teach in every school, honestly, when we're young. It's something that feels very academic while we're doing it. There's homework and stickers and shit.
They give you grades.
No grades.
That's all right.
But
You
there
get a
are
C+
stickers.
for this
You get a
session.
sticker if you do the homework, and it's a pretty good trade-off
Everybody
for me.
loves
Yeah.
a good sticker.
It's like a award
They're
system,
running out of
kind
good stickers, so I haven't been doing the homework lately.
Yeah.
You got to get more stickers in there.
But it's related to the dialectics that we experience on a daily basis, right? With our thoughts, our emotions, our moods. And part of what I want to be open about on this show is in going through the mental health system and doing that route, right? I've gotten myself some diagnoses, or some labels, as I like to call them. And I don't know how true they are. I know there's a book that says I'm allegedly these things, right? But what's been effective for me has been doing therapies and even trying medications that are recommended for people with those labels. And when I've been doing that, I found myself, I think, a helpful combination of a therapeutic approach, if you will, that's been effective for me. But DBT is really around trying to put time between you having your initial thought or feeling and the response that you make, or your reaction. So it's about slowing things down, processing your tough emotions without lashing out or releasing them in a way that's going to be hurtful to you in the long run, right? So with some of my diagnoses, like depression, bipolar disorder, type 2, which is primarily the depressed type, and then you have hypomanic episodes instead of full-blown mania, like someone with bipolar type 1 may experience. Borderline personality disorder, which is a fun one and a tough nut to crack.
Yeah. I've heard of that, BPT or BPD.
Right.
And it's kind of like, I mean, I've only briefly looked into it. I haven't really looked too deep, but it seems like it has to do with your interrelationships with people.
Exactly.
And how your emotions affect that.
Yep.
Is that kind of...
Yeah, interpersonal relationships are a big part of it, where you feel a lot of dependence on the people in your life, whether they're best friends or loved ones or family, and you get some definition from them. So it's a general kind of lack of or gray area when it comes to self-identity. Self-harm is a component. And I think really just overvaluing personal relationships, where someone becomes your world, they're your everything.
Right.
You spend all your time with this person. You need their energy to continue, essentially.
And if anything threatens that connection that you have, that can trigger some challenging emotions and
Right.
some tough,
Like you
tough
saw me
situations.
when I went through a breakup not too long ago, 3 years ago, maybe, back when we were in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I can remember what that experience was like for me and how long that went on. And definitely makes me relate to a BPD diagnosis. Doesn't make me say like, oh yeah, I definitely have that.
Yeah.
But it makes me go like, yeah, it's possible.
Yeah. Well, breakups are tough
Yeah.
for everybody. I mean, I've seen people just turn completely inside out, like after a breakup.
What's the worst experience you've had after a breakup?
Oh man, I just went like full blown meltdown, just like super depressed for like months, because I was like, you know how it is,
right?
Like, you picture your whole life with somebody, and then it's like all those plans change, and you're like beside yourself. You don't know what to do. So yeah, I've definitely been through like a tough breakup.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're just like, yeah. You get depressed. You become hopeless. You're like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I mean, you just have to, work through it. I think anybody would be fine just going through a breakup, but yeah, it was challenging.
Do you think that to prevent that is to go into a relationship and not lose like individualism, or like not lose that, where you're still an individual. And like, I think when we're young, we go into a relationship and we lose that, and we just become so connected to the other person,
right,
that we lose sight of ourselves. And that's why it hurts maybe so much when we lose that person. So I guess this is just like relationship talk or whatever, but like to go into it and still to keep that in mind, that I'm going to be myself and still be my, an individual, and
right,
not lose sight of myself
right,
while I'm with this person.
Absolutely. And I think that's especially important for someone who has a BPD diagnosis, is you really have to maintain that sense of individualism and hold on to the things that make you an individual, and not just become so ingrained with this other person that you start to get rid of the boundaries that should be there. There are some natural boundaries that I think are harder for someone with BPD, and some things that have to be explicitly thought about and communicated.
Yeah.
It's extra fun if you have two people come together who are both diagnosed BPD and you put them in a relationship. You end up with some interesting situations there.
Yeah.
Been there.
That's what you call codependent.
Oh yeah. You definitely get some codependence, and you get some unhealthy traits that I think start to rise up to the surface.
Yeah.
I think so.
Example? You have an example for that?
I think an example for me would be starting to get so overly dependent and not really still having an established trust with somebody. That's something that I've experienced a lot, is like I'll get very involved and almost dependent upon somebody without really having an established trust. And I don't know if that's because I just don't trust people or it's just that hasn't happened yet at that point in our relationship,
Mm-hmm.
You kind of just jump into the deep end.
Just exactly. Cannonball in, let's go.
Yeah.
Like get my goggles, my swimmies, just
We're swimming.
don't feel the water first. Just go into it.
Love.
So you end up with two people who kind of feel like that towards each other, and you almost cut off everything else in your life sometimes. The only thing that matters is the relationship that you have with this person.
It's kind of like what you see, like when your friend or someone gets into a relationship, and they just disappear, like they just fall off the face of the earth,
right?
Because they become so integrated with this other person. It's like they just want to spend all their time and like all their like emotional energy on somebody.
Is there anybody that's not like that when they first fall in love? I feel like that's just a very
I feel
You
like
think it's a common thing?
Very
I
common.
don't think I'm really like that.
No.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just you, man.
It might just
Maybe
be
that's a
me.
little T you got to work through.
Maybe.
I'm a pretty tough nut to crack, I feel like, when it comes to affection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like spending time with somebody, like it can't be too much for me at first.
Right.
Yep.
You got to go slow.
Mm-hmm.
Just take things
Take
slow.
it easy.
Just
Just take it easy. So, having those experiences and dealing with depression for I don't really know how long. I haven't like stopped and looked back at my life to try to figure out like when did this start? But it's been a while. It's been since I was a kid, I know that.
Depression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think I dealt with it differently back then and I didn't know what it was.
Right.
But I definitely had the signs were all there, you know. So I don't know. I'd like to think it started somewhere around the age of being born. No. Yeah, I don't really know. But having that experience, sharing that with people and connecting with other people who have depression, diagnosed or not, I think it gives you a much better understanding of somebody. Because people who have been through their own version of what depression looked like for them, you can understand maybe what it feels like for somebody else. Somebody who's never experienced depression, or at least hasn't recognized that they've gone through depression, I think they can have a harder time empathizing and relating to how hard it can be when you're really in the thick of it.
Do you have a harder time connecting with people who have never, according to them, have never experienced depression?
I have a harder time relating to, I think. There's someone in my life, a family member that I met up with after my dad's suicide. And we got under the topics of depression and addiction. And he essentially told me that neither one is real. Addiction is not a real thing, and being depressed isn't real. That our minds are powerful enough that if you don't want to drink, you don't drink. And if you feel sad, feel happy. Do something that's going to make yourself happy. And I just felt I felt threatened at that point in the conversation. Because
he would, like, you just didn't feel like your
I didn't feel
depression was
validated for
Yeah.
my experience because
Right.
I have gone through depression, sometimes
Right.
6 or 9 months where I've been in a rut. And to be told that that feeling's not real, that I chose that essentially and I wasn't strong enough to get out of it, kind of sucks to hear.
Do you think that he would say something like that just as a coping mechanism so that he could get over his own depression? He would just tell himself it's not real?
It's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah. Or he just never felt it.
Or just has never felt it or isn't aware of that feeling, has found a way to get through it, isn't someone that's susceptible to depression.
He's just been blessed with a happy brain, maybe.
Or maybe he has anxiety, maybe he has other things that have shown up for him. But maybe depression isn't everyone's thing, you know. I think people have different experiences, for sure.
Yeah.
So another thing that I've gotten involved with recently that's been really cool and I wanted to give a shout to has been through the AFSP, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They do a Survivors of Suicide Loss group twice a month in Asheville. It's the second Thursday of the month. And I'll have to get the exact address. I can't remember where it is. It's at a community center over in West Asheville. And then the last Monday of the month at the Rathbun House over by Mission Hospital. And this has been a really great group for being in a room full of people who have also lost someone to suicide, understand that experience and are on their own journey with losing someone in that way. And it's been a really good space for me to open up about some things that I've been feeling that I haven't recognized or haven't found the outlet to let them out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, my dad wrote us a letter about 9 months before he died, which talked about some of his depression and drinking and some other personal things. I shared a little snippet of that letter with my group this week. The one that talked about what my dad felt like, how he's never felt pleased with himself. Even if other people seem happy with what he's done, he just didn't feel happy about it. I read that bit to maybe help everyone understand what someone who decides to take their life, what maybe they're feeling, which is that they're never good enough or that the bar is set at a place that they can't reach it. So those groups have been great. My sister has joined me to a couple. Shout out to her, Maggie. She made the new logo. Really happy with how that came out and excited about that. But she's been joining me some of those groups. Kat Dolan, who was on episode 1, she joined me 1 week for a group. And it really is a great environment for anyone who's lost someone to suicide. So, and if you're hearing this and you're not from the Asheville area, the AFSP has these types of groups all over the country. If you just hop on the Googles and look up AFSP SOSL, Survivors of Suicide Loss Group, and the name of your town or your area, there's probably something that's pretty close that you could check out.
Yeah, I'd imagine these groups might be a little bit of an eye-opener, just with how you can relate to someone else and share your experience. Have you come across like a scenario where you share something and someone has come up to you and is like, I know exactly what you're talking about?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely. And I've had people that came up to me after reading the letter that just wanted to give me a hug. They could relate to it and appreciated the sharing of it. I had an experience almost on the flip side this week where one of the group members shared, just without getting into too much detail, that she essentially realized that she lived to make her dad proud. And when she didn't have that any longer, kind of broke the foundation of that system for her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was hearing her say that and put that in that way made me realize, like, oh, I'm going through the same thing. Where a lot of my pride that I feel would come from my dad and his reaction to what I was doing. And when you realize that, it's hard. But I think it's important to note that and realize that you have to create that feeling of pride within. You have to be proud of yourself.
do it for yourself, not for someone else.
Yeah.
Essentially.
So an activity that I've gone through lately is like in the things that I'm doing, I stop and ask, like, would this make my dad proud? If the answer is no, I do it anyway. And if the answer is yes, I at least know, like, cool. I can kind of create that feeling internally and just know that I'm doing something that would have made him proud, you know? But yeah, that's a little bit about kind of just some of my experiences and how that's all tied in. One that I always love talking about that I still have yet to really fully own when it comes to just conversation and not oversharing with people, right, is my hospital stay, which was not too long ago, past 2 years, I would say, right? I had a point where after losing my dad, I was just so depressed and hopeless and suicidal and a lot of things, honestly. I decided to just check myself into the hospital, and I was in there for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of them trying out different medications and seeing if anything would help me feel a little better, and it all made me feel worse.
Yeah.
met a lot of interesting people through that time. A lot of people that were like me, average people going through a tough time. And I think it gave me a lot of empathy for people who go through mental health opportunities, because there I was going through one myself.
Mm-hmm. You think about people, like you think about people who they're admitted to a, what is it, inpatient
Facility.
yeah. And you think like, oh, I'm sure like most people would just think like, oh yeah, they're in the loony bin, like that's who they are. That's yeah, they're just crazy,
Right.
They kind of dismiss it, but a lot of people don't realize that like it could happen to anybody. Like all it takes is the right circumstances and the right things to go wrong for you. That
Right.
You're just like, you don't have many other options. I mean, I guess you do, but that's one of the things I think people would lean on for help.
Right.
Because I feel like the system that we have now, just with mental health, it's gotten better. It's got some really constructive tools that people can use to really just work through their challenges. But yeah, I think there's still some things that are left to be improved on. And I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with this?
No, that's okay. I'll pick it up for you.
Yeah.
I think there's a
Take it
really
away.
important component of combating social isolation and depression and anxiety. It's in a book, the little bit that I have read, book that I gave to you, John, Lost Connections.
Yeah. I've read through most of that book. It's been pretty great. Like,
Right.
really, really eye opening.
Good read.
Yeah, I recommend it to anybody. If anyone out there is confused or they, don't know why they're feeling the way that they are, that book it connects a lot of those feelings to almost like a list of very specific reasons, very specific circumstances.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, it's been really helpful, just like for me at least, to understand, why. Because it's the big thing that people connect with depression and anxiety is brain chemistry. They think like, yep, you have these receptors in your brain that are malfunctioning and you don't get a certain chemical, and that's why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. But a lot of what this book talks about is maybe not so much the chemical part of it, but more of the environmental and psychosocial aspects of it. And it's like, well, people have specific needs to feel good about themselves.
Right.
And when a lot of those needs aren't being met, that can cause a lot of depression and anxiety.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think it's definitely easy to see the comparison that's being drawn there. And I think what they talk about in Lost Connections. Do you remember the author of that book, by the way?
No, I can't think of it.
We'll have to
Yeah,
include that one in the description.
Yeah,
but
you can give it a Googles.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing that it does is it puts depression and anxiety in a similar box. Where, like you said, in that box, and the reason that it appears is because your needs are not being met. I think that's an interesting thing about depression and anxiety that can often be forgotten in the moment, which is that they're trying to tell us something.
Mm-hmm.
When you feel very depressed or when you feel really anxious in a situation, your body and your mind are trying to send you a message when you feel depressed or anxious. And with that feeling, sometimes you can use it as a door to make the change that's going to help that feeling. In the same way that if your legs feel really tight, you can stretch them out and they're going to feel a little bit better. In that same way, if you're feeling a little bit depressed and you practice some self-care and meditate and go out and be social. Maybe you go for a jog. Maybe you eat a healthy shake. You do whatever the things are that are going to take care of your body and your mind. Before you know it, you're feeling a little bit better. You're feeling more connected. And that's the message I think we can take from depression and anxiety when we feel it, especially when we feel it chronically, is maybe there's something I can change about my situation that's going to help at least reduce the impact that this is having on me. It might not make the depression or anxiety go away, but can at least make me able to live with it better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. What's next?
I don't know.
Now what do we talk about?
We've gone down some good rabbit holes. I
Yeah.
think it's good just to open some of this up and kind of set the tone moving forward, some of the things that I'd like to talk about. I think a big thing that's come up time and time again with the guests that I've had on the show so far are just some of the challenges that are facing artists in Asheville. And I think this is a broader problem than just this city, right? That's something that I would certainly like to continue focusing on moving forward. There were some things that have come up, such as having gigs that are unpaid. Happens quite frequently in the city, right? I believe it was Chiltonic in episode 2 brought up the idea of artists maybe being hesitant to help each other in this city because it is competitive. Just the fact that a lot of the work here is seasonal, with tourists in the summer, in the fall. The winter can be a really tough time for people who are trying to make a living performing.
Yeah.
And then the one that's not a surprise to any of us is just trying to find affordable rent. Can be a challenge, especially if you don't have a steady income, if you're in an artist type situation.
Yeah. Being an artist is a thankless job.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, especially if you're starting out, I feel like.
Right.
It's like you said, a lot of them play for free or play, for very little money. I mean, you busk, and I'm sure some days, if there's a lot of foot traffic on the street, and you might have a good haul with people throwing you tips, and some days it might not be so great at all.
Yeah, it's just the thing of being an artist, man, the starving artist.
Yeah.
We have to play and we have to create, and if we did it for money, like, who's going to do it for money? Or like, who's in it for the money? I guess there's probably a lot of people in it for the money or make money doing it, but yeah, it's kind of an age-old thing that you're gonna struggle if you're creating art, because it's just, I don't know.
Is art undervalued?
Undervalued?
That's a tough nut to crack.
And I don't mean financially. I don't mean do people not pay enough for art. I just mean in our culture, in our society, does art not have the place that it should have?
I think that probably comes down to the individual. I don't know if you're talking about like as a country or a society in whole. Do we like respect art, or does everyone, or like does the whole society love art?
Does art have the power that it should?
Probably not, because money's always taking over everything.
Right.
I think we're just a greedy society, and we're more focused on that than the beautiful things in life, like art,
Right.
and the world around us. But I think that's like a growing trend, obviously, in the last few years with Instagram, stuff like of like actually appreciating the world around us and art around us. So I think that just comes down to an individual level. Like, what do you appreciate, and like, how do you see art? You know, more than thinking of how a culture sees it.
Yeah.
Because if I start thinking like that, man, I'll start being cynical, because I don't know.
You think like what's the point, you know?
Right.
Why should I make art that's, you know, authentic and genuine to me when
when someone's going to take it and
matters,
just throw it on the ground like, oh, look at that piece of trash over there.
it only matters
Yeah.
when someone else likes it, when
Yeah.
someone else, you know,
Yeah.
wants to pay money for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think art is really just a personal thing. It's like
Right.
we're artistic beings naturally, I think. And
Yeah, no,
Uh-huh.
that's good perspective. I think that's really good perspective. And I think you hit on a good point, which is that I think even the definition of art is different for everybody, because I think art is something that makes you feel something. And not the same things are going to make everybody feel the same things.
What do you think that guy felt when he saw that banana duct taped to the wall?
The guy that ate it,
The guy that bought it for $120,000.
he probably
I
thought
mean, it was
like,
the
oh,
same
I
guy.
need to hide some money for a tax scheme that I'm doing.
Yep.
This banana is going to work.
Mm-hmm. Jeez. Yeah.
Oh, man, that's a whole nother topic. But fine art is a different story. There's a lot of money that's being hidden in fine art. Tax-free money.
what, physically?
Yeah, sure thing.
Hmm.
If I have $1 million and I'm going to get taxed for having that money at the end of the year, I'm going to go buy $1 million Andy Warhol
There you go.
and hang that up on my wall. And now I have an asset that is only going to go up in value probably and can't be taxed. So just something to think about. I was in a work environment not too long ago where the owner was very, very wealthy. It was in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And there were Andy Warhol paintings in the lobbies and just very expensive sculptures and paintings. And it was an interesting place. I don't know how much I should talk about it. I don't think I'm really allowed to get into the nitty
You
gritty.
signed an NDA. Remember that?
Yeah.
That's not like proprietary information. You can talk about the ridiculous shit that they have all over the building. You know.
So another thing I wanted to make sure I did today was represent who and what I support. I think that's important. I think there are a lot of great people that have helped me get this off the ground, and people that have participated so far. So I want to make sure that they get recognized. John, I definitely want to thank you for helping make the intro music. It's something that I really like a lot, and I think represents what I was hoping to go for this show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for taking the time to do that.
My pleasure.
You're a talented musician and producer, and I get excited when I see you working on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love it too. I appreciate it. I love any opportunity where I can strut my stuff. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
Just to show people, because I feel like by default, just with the kind of person that I am, I almost like to hide my creations.
Right.
I'm very like hesitant to project those things and share them with people, and it's tough because, you know, one of the joys of creating music and art is sharing them.
Right.
And giving that good feeling that you get when you make something, giving it to somebody else. So, yeah, I was glad to, you know, make that track for you and have it somewhere where it's, you know, it's going to be shared with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Once a week.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The start of every show.
Mm-hmm.
And the gong in there is, I think, a cool way to pay homage to just the meditation moment that we do at the beginning of every show.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll put the song right after that to kind of be the gong that brings us back to the show. I also want to give a shout out, I know I did already, but to Maggie, my sister. She did a great job with the new logo. I'm very happy with how it came out. It's something that I'm excited to throw on a t-shirt or something.
Yeah, I love it, man.
Make a sticker or it came out really cool. So thanks to Maggie for helping out there. I support any local artists who are doing the thing, you know? It's not easy. Nate, you know, a lot of the challenges that come with trying to get your art out there and trying to do it consistently in a way that's constantly growing. I think the artists that I really respect are the ones that continually come out there and do it time and time again and do it well. Nate, I think you're one of them, even though you haven't been playing out live often lately. Every time I hear you perform, just the new stuff you're working on, it's always constantly evolving and moving forward.
Thanks, man.
Chill Tonic, they were on episode 2. They're a band that I'm always really excited when they're in town. They always have something fresh, a fresh take at their live performance, and they're always hungry and seems like they want to put something out there, you know. Kat Dolan and Out of Your Mind from episode 1. Big shout out to them and everything that Out of Your Mind is working on to help combat social isolation. They do several events a month out there in Boone, North Carolina. Things from hiking to workshops and just different, I think they had a jam session one time. Just a way to get connected with other people and talk to people in a way that helps you acknowledge and respect that part of you that's struggling, you know. Also want to shout out Matt Dunn in AV Live. Matt on the ones and twos, producing for us as he does every week. Really appreciative of all the work he's been able to do for us there. Want to thank Abby the Spoon Lady and the Tater Boys. They were on last week, and that was a fun show. They played for us, and we got into some really good stuff and some deep stuff as well. Which again is kind of the intent of this program, is to maybe get into some of the conversations that you wouldn't hear on a normal interview or radio show. Try to pull up some of the deeper stuff. I wanted to give a quick shout out to 2 organizations, one being Riverbend CBD. It's a product that I use every day. I actually even brought it with me. This wasn't planned. I had it in my backpack because I was going to take it beforehand.
Shout out
to Riverbend. They make a really great product. I've tried a lot of CBD. I've tried it different ways. I've tried the oil, which is what this is here. It's just like a little tincture, and you get the oil, put it under your tongue for 30 seconds. I've tried smoking the hemp. I've tried oils, which you vape, and just a bunch of different things. And this has worked the best for me. Really helpful for anxiety and sleep are really the 2 things that I use it for. If I take a couple droppers of this, the chances are I'm probably going to fall asleep afterwards. It definitely helps, and it's been helpful for me. It's something I use, like I said, almost every day. So big shout out to them, and love to see what they're doing. And the other I wanted to shout out is called Divine Scum. I don't know if you guys have heard of Divine Scum. I love the name. It's got some like shock value to it. You hear it, you really don't know what it is, and it makes you want to ask some questions. But what Divine Scum is a clothing brand. They make hats, like winter hats, and then they have sweatshirts and t-shirts, a lot of cool stuff that I saw on their page. And what it is as well is a community for people to help spread awareness to things that they're going through. So it's almost like a blog style setup where once you've entered the community and purchased some of Divine Scum's material, you're part of their blog, you're a member of their forum, and you can help just share what you're going through or ask questions of the community. And it's really just a helpful way and a platform for people to be able to kind of shout out and talk about some of the things that they're struggling with that maybe you don't just go and post on social media, right? So it's been a pretty cool thing. I think a really great awareness project, and really happy for the work that they're doing to help just kind of, again, continue that conversation and keep it going, which I think is important.
Right on.
Cool. Well, we are right about at time. I know we were going to play a little bit, Nate. Is that something that you're really feeling, or do you want to save it for next time that we have you on?
Yeah, we can save it.
All right. I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
Build the tension a little bit.
Build the tension. Maybe try to break out of my shell that I've been building around me for the last however long.
32 years.
32 years. Yeah, I broke out of it for a couple of years. Now I'm like crawling back into it. Maybe it's just the winter time, but I don't know.
I think it's a tough time of year for a lot of different reasons for a lot of different people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a weird time, man, for me. I don't know. I'm in a weird place with playing.
Yeah.
It's probably just because I haven't been playing out at all, and I've just been hidden in my room so much, but yeah. We'll get past it. And, yeah.
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 Well, thanks for sharing. I hate to hear that. You've been in a tough spot.
It's all right.
I've also seen you get through similar spots before.
All right. For sure.
And sometimes you come out of them with some good music.
Yeah, I'm going to come out, I've still been writing so much.
Yeah.
And practicing, so I'm going to come out with some stuff.
Yeah,
for
definitely.
Sure.
Depressed people make the best art. So
best art, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you got something going there.
Shout out to depressed people, including the 3 that are in here.
I've heard of a thing where like people who are creative, like artists, they're hesitant to really deal with their depression and not be depressed because they feel like they feel like that's gonna make them less creative and less artistic, that their art is not going to be as good as it was because they're not depressed anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've definitely had that thought, and I've heard it before. But I feel like I like the stuff that I create even when I'm not depressed. I definitely have found like some happy feeling stuff, and I like that too. I like knowing that I don't have to be depressed to create. I know that it is in me, and it's always going to be in me, and that's what I hold on to. I don't hold on to the depression or the anxiety or whatever moods. I hold on to the fact that I love to create and I love art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's got to be a little bit different creating in each of those mind states.
Yeah. And yeah, it's great because you can come up with all different kinds of feels and like just based off who you are.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I think it represents a different element of you or a different side of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for joining me today, guys. Is there anything you guys have on your minds before we go? Anything you want to throw out there?
Thanks, Rob, for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man, as a friend.
Yeah, this has been real fun. Yeah, this is great. I'm glad I did this.
Yeah. When I thought about doing this episode where it was more of a solo kind of thing where I got to set the platform, you were definitely 2 people that I thought about having on.
Mm-hmm.
I think 2 people that know me well, and you're both handsome.
What are you doing after this?
Going home. How about you?
We live together.
No, I just really appreciate the perspective that you guys are able to bring to the table, and thank you guys for joining me today. So until next time, don't forget to breathe. This is Rob Lavati with Breathing Room. Check us out on Instagram at Breathing Room Show. And pretty soon we'll be available on YouTube and Spotify and iTunes. So look out for that. Shout out to my mom too. She's in the studio today. She's pretty cool and very supportive. So hi, Mom. If you're listening to this, give your mom a hug today or tomorrow, maybe the next day.
Hello, Mother.
ASAP.
Hey, Mom. Mother. All right. Thanks for joining, everybody.